Mishakeila. We're learning the Maamar based on the verses of Mishakeila Bakar Batecha Spis Bar Yamach Male. There'll be no bereaved or barren woman in your land. I'll fill the number of your days. Following the verse of Vatem Esavaya Lekechem Verchas Nachmacha Ves Memecha Vasurasi Machal Mikarbecha. Shall serve Avaya, serve God, and you'll bless your bread and your water. I'll move illness from your midst. The Maamar unofficially is about 3 parts to it, essentially. The first part is looking at the verses here. We're looking at the idea of serving God. Does this make sense? God has everything. He doesn't need anything from us, so why are we serving him? Does it have an effect? If we serve him, then that gets us the magic coins. Does that get us extra blessings? Does our service make a difference? What? The first part addressed the fact that first we said, well, it depends on which level we're talking about. So aspects of God that deal with creation, have a relationship with creation, gets affected by what creation does. And then aspects that are higher than that, dimensions higher than that, don't necessarily care about what's going on. And then we said, okay, that's a good answer, but it says, I will remove illness. There's a first person that's inserted in middle of the third person. So what's going on here? We say, okay, that's capital N narrative of the Torah. That's God's essence. First, originally we said it doesn't care, but then we say, actually, essence is here. So obviously essence does care because just insert himself into the narration. Then we said, okay, essence does care about the realization of creation. As in the refinement of man and creation, which ultimately is going to lead to the home for God in this world. That's the purpose of what we're doing here. So that essence cares about. The details of how we get to there, that's for the other dimensions of God that have the relationship to creation. So ultimately, it doesn't really make sense that our service matters, but it does because God decided so it should be. So yes, it matters, and yes, it matters. Even all the way up to essence of God. So all the way up to the highest point, the service matters. Just in different kinds of ways. The second thing that we said, well, kind of the unofficial second section is, okay, now that we know that our service matters, how do we go about service? What does it look like? That's where we got into the idea of fear. It begins with fear, servant to the master, as in you put yourself aside to serve the master, but fear is not the end game because we're going to have complete service. We also need to have love of God. And we saw the example of that kind of in davening. We started with hodu, acknowledgement. I know you're correct, even though I can't fully take it in. We'd lead up to Shema. Shema is love of God. And then we actually get to the Midah, which is all the blessings that draw God down into this world. Essentially, service of God needs both fear and love. And we kind of already mentioned davening, but what is service of the heart? This is davening. Davening, done in its absolute kind of way, is going to be fear and love. Love is going to be wholly expressed during our time of davening. One of the things that we actually mentioned is that we just have to be aware, even as we're going about our service, and it could be that we're going to have a beautiful davening filled with love of God, but we still always have to be aware that just because you had a great davening doesn't mean that you're totally set. When it comes to transgression, when it comes to behaving the way we're supposed to, which is fear gets us in line for behavior, love motivates change, the refinement of man and creation. In regard to that, we kind of have to have like an addict sort of mentality and thinking that one step in the wrong direction can send us totally off the bandwagon. So you can have a beautiful davening, but that doesn't mean that you're set. Okay, I've achieved ultimate divine service and I'm perfect and everything's good. No, just the evil inclination, the negative side of things, the materialistic side, maybe just went to sleep during davening. So you got to be ever on your watch for that. And then here's a little bit of a sidebar. Speaking of that, the evil inclination going to sleep, we've mentioned before, we saw it in Tanya actually, where it talks about a tzaddik, a fully righteous person who has complete love of God, also has to have absolute hatred of evil. And that a lot of people, when they hear that, they don't really get it. You're like, if someone's so righteous, how could they hate? How could hate be a thing? We kind of explain like a mother, think of like the mama bear kind of thing. Like somebody threatens the kids, the mama bear is there. So it's an absolute no if there's any threat. You can see how actually it could coexist, an absolute love and absolute hatred of something that's threatening. And that's so. But for the rest of us that are not necessarily at that level of the hatred of the absolute evil, so part of it, we describe that a person doesn't transgress unless a spirit of folly enters him. So ruach shtus, we call it, a spirit of folly. We've discussed this a lot. Now it seems like we say spirit of folly, that kind of sounds like, oh, not unless there's nonsense, being nonsensical, and that's why someone would transgress. Because it's not the natural state of a Jew to just be like, that's fine to sin today. We're not like that. Generally, go along and get along kind of thing. It's only the evil inclination works on us. Either it numbs us to try to get us to cross the line or anything like that, but it shows that it has to be a state that we're brought to. Someone could go there through negligence, but it's not something we're actively necessarily pursuing without the evil inclination kind of motivating us. So you say, how can you hate evil? The spirit of folly, it's not great if we don't take it as seriously as we're supposed to. It's folly in the sense of why are you going astray, but it's not folly in the sense that it's not silly. So we've spoken about that before also, about how clever it is. And then talk with the other class today. Think of an example. Let's say you know somebody, you've got a really good friend who's very slick. They're a lot of fun, but they're very sly. They're very clever. This friend, let's say if you're 16 and the friend's like, let's go drink and smoke or something like that. You're not supposed to be doing that, but you might not say like, oh my God, it's such an evil, terrible thing. Because like in 2 years from now, it'll be legal to do it anyway. Maybe you do it, maybe you don't. You let your friend who's a smooth talker talk you into it because you don't really see it necessarily as evil. It's just like, oh, it's illegal, but it doesn't seem like such a travesty. But now let's say this friend takes it to a whole nother level. Any kind of transgression or even just taking something simpler. Let's say you're somebody who's prone to worry. A good friend would calm you down. Everything's going to be fine. I know you're anxious about this, but it's all going to work out and everything's going to be good. That's what a good friend does. Your slick friend, it is going to be terrible. Not only do they keep feeding it, but even to the extent that, let's say, it's starting to physically affect somebody. They're worrying, the anxiety can physically affect somebody. They're not eating, they're not sleeping, whatever. And instead of backing off, they keep doing it. If you would be the one watching this, you'd be like, what are you doing? You're not just not making it better. You're making it actively worse. So they're having psychosomatic symptoms now. What are you doing? And it's not just that. When you realize what it could drive the person to, what that worry and anxiety could drive a person to, you realize you're not just misbehaving. That's an evil thing that you've done. How could you do that to somebody? So when you think about the evil inclination, who's not just our slick best friend, he's actually inside of us, actively working on us, it's not just somebody who's, oh, let's go have fun. It's not not just somebody who's like, let's just drink when we're 16. It's not just somebody who's doing that. It's somebody who's actively trying to get you to transgress. And it's not just a transgression. It's something that when you're in a normal frame of mind, you would recoil from it. Oh no, I would never do that. Never. But then all of a sudden in the moment, someone finds themselves doing it. Why? Because the evil inclination is, it's not so bad. We're fine. Don't pay attention to that. They almost cloud your emotions so your logical response can't kick in. And somebody who does that to somebody else is not just not a friend. That's an evil person. How can you lead somebody astray like that? How can you do that? It's actually a very interesting thing because the one person the Torah has no mercy for is somebody who leads somebody else astray. Specifically when it comes to idolatry, the Torah very specifically says you may not have compassion. You are forbidden from having compassion on that person. That person gets somebody to worship idols or serve idols, which can take in a lot of directions, but just in a literal sense, the Torah is like, there's no compassion for that person. Zero. We have no mercy. So when you think about how can you hate evil, you can hate that which actively would do this to somebody else. I have no mercy for something like that. And that's where active hatred of evil comes from. Now, the thing is, when we're sitting in a class and you're talking about it, it makes so much sense. But yet, the point is to remember that, not just now, but to remember that when we're faced with some sort of temptation or challenge or whatever it is. Shabbos, candles, kosher, whatever it's going to be. Where it's like, oh, I would never do that. Would you ever punch somebody in the face randomly? No. And then all of a sudden what? Somebody finds themselves in a situation, they panic, and maybe they punch somebody. And you're like, why you never do that? And you're like, I don't know. Somebody just came over me. I just punched them. What? I would never speak that way to someone. I would never lash out in anger. Well, you just lost your cool and you totally lashed out in anger. That's so not me. Yeah. Because we get clouded. Even thinking in a more realistic way, we're very good at giving advice to other people. And I'm not saying that facetiously. I mean, literally. If a friend would come to you for advice, if you would have to sort out their life for them, you'd be very good at it. Why? Because no emotions are blocking your logic. But when it comes to ourselves, forget it. All of a sudden, nothing is possible and nothing's working out and I can't do this. And if you would be your friend and that would be you speaking to your friend self, you'd be like, dude, I know it's overwhelming, but you're going to be fine. We'll take this one step at a time. So logical. Makes so much sense. So that's an evil inclination. Of course, we could have hatred for something that would do that to us. To cloud your emotions so you don't have trust, you don't have faith, so you can't be logical anymore. Make it, oh, it's fine. I could punch him. I didn't like it. What? No. So that's what the evil inclination does. So we're talking about hatred for something. So we have to try to remember that. We have to try to hold on to that hatred of the evil so that when it's going to try to work on us and be like, it's okay if you yell at him because he was being annoying. No. We don't yell at people like that. It's not the same as being firm or boundaries. No, we don't just screech at people. We don't do that. So we have to hold on to that because it's very good at what it does. So that's why we have to be always aware of that. We can never say, oh no, we're fine, we're set. Anyways, Torah is so realistic. Chassidus is so realistic. Anyways, that kind of wraps up the unofficial second section of the Maamar, which ends off with saying we need fear of God, love of God. It's all a rigorous process getting us to where we need to, which is why avodas, divine service, comes from the language of tanning hides. So it's a constant rigorous process of refinement. Then we got to the part that we are in the middle of now, which is what are the spiritual counterparts? There will be no bereaved or barren woman. So the barren woman is the akara. That's someone who, in spiritual terminology, does not give birth to intellect, does not give birth to emotions. And there's two different kinds of that. Either because they literally can't take in. It would be someone who didn't have a physical anatomy to take in. That we saw in the Matrix, God had to make a womb for them to actually have children. But here would be someone who's so full of their own self-concerns that they can't take in. So it's not even a negative thing in the sense that it's not like they're running after temptation and desire, but we're worried about just regular things. So my brain is too full right now. I can't take in. And if you can't take in, you can't go through the intellectual process. You're not going to get to the motive state of having love and fear of God to have complete divine service. Then the other option is, what we said, Urzer Latzadik, we have to have the sowing of Torah mitzvahs, the light of God, has to be a factor in all of this. The command, there shall not be a bereaved or barren woman, don't be the akara, someone who cannot take in, someone who cannot go through the intellectual process, excitement, meditation, contemplation, etc., to then give birth to the child of love and fear. So intellect being the parent, and love and fear, and the other emotive states being the children. Then last time you saw, what's a Mishakeila? Mishakeila is someone, God forbid, someone who buries their young, so that would be someone who, they went through the intellectual process, and they had the love and fear of God, but it's not enduring, it wasn't sustaining. Not just that it's not sustaining, so don't be the Mishakeila that just kind of has the spark and then it loses. But not just that, if a person would ever reach a point of self-satisfaction, just kind of a little bit warning about before, they're like, no what, I reached the good spiritual spot, I'm good here, that can actually lead them to falling back, God forbid, into that kara stage. Because why? As soon as you're full of your own satisfaction, as soon as I'm satisfied, I'm content, now you're full. You're full with your own self-concerns again. Instead of just always staying focused on the goal. How do you get across a tight wire? By staying focused on the end game, not by looking at how far you've gone. How do you climb? By looking up. As soon as you're going to stop and start assessing, then you're losing your traction. And you can't keep moving forward. And then we said, Losia, Mishakelia, Barkar, Bartzecha, there shall not be that kar or Mishakelia, Bartzecha in your land. Bartzecha, we looked at the word of Eretz. Eretz comes from the word of Retz, that it ran to do the will of its maker, but also that it's coming from the word of Retzon, of desire. So don't be full of your own desires and satisfaction, which leads to either the Mishakelia or Kara stage, basically. And that's what we get to now with the text. All right, here we go for text. Section 6. So something else that a person has to take counsel with in his soul. Basically, something else you got to consider. That even when his service is going to be the way it's supposed to be, that's in regard to the comprehension of the mind, as in gone the intellectual process, and also in relation regarding the attributes of the heart, midas of the heart, as in love and fear. Now we're talking about someone who's got it all. Everything is exactly the way it's supposed to be. But there's a caveat. First, we'll describe this individual. That love and fear are revealed in the heart. So parent gave birth to emotion, intellect gave birth to emotive state. These are not false fantasies, these are not false images, as in it's real, there really is love and fear. This is real love and fear. It's felt even. They're felt in the fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs. And even when he's doing Torah mitzvahs actually, as in person, the parent gave birth to emotion, intellect gave birth to the emotive state. It's real love and fear. It's felt in the heart. It's revealed in the heart. It's even something that's known in relation to Torah mitzvahs. And even when they're actually doing Torah mitzvahs, Yodehu kavanas mitzvahs, he knows the intent of the mitzvahs. What is the underlying kavanah of it? What is the spiritual kavanah of it? Even more than that, so it's not just he understands the mitzvahs, etc., but he also knows what's being drawn down when he's doing through the fulfillment of the mitzvahs. Do you remember we saw in the Tshuva Maamar that each mitzvah, they're like clusters of grapes, so each one draws down from a different attribute, right, in the limbs of the body, etc. Here, this person knows all this, so we're talking about somebody who's definitely not in their car state, they've reached everything the way it's supposed to be, their avodah is exactly the way it's supposed to be. That through tzedakah, that is drawing down the kav, the line, the vector of kindness, so do tzedakah that draws down kindness into the world, chesed into the world. That through the service of gevura, strength, discipline, being judicious in your actions. Mishpat Gam Rabbi Yaakov, this is referencing the verse that we saw from Dillim. Nasas Hamshacha b'kav gevura, he's drawing down, through this is being drawn down, the kav, the vector of gevura, strength, severity, discipline, etc. Vayidei limit Torah, shu kav emtzai, nasas hamshacha b'kav emtzai, that through study of the Torah, he's drawing down the middle vector, which is basically compassion, tiferes, beauty, harmony, mercy, etc. So his service is to the extent, to the point that it actually fulfills the language of the verse, you shall serve His service is so perfect, it's so correct, he actually fulfills it all. It's not some make-believe fantasy, it's a real service. Everything is exactly in line the way it's supposed to be. It's a complete service. That the name of Havaya is, was, will be, past, present, and future are like one. So his reality is the infinite reality. Not just that when we're talking about time, but also even above the level, even higher than that, the level where Havaya is higher than the chain of creation, is the chain of creation. Nasa Elokechem, Havaya is your Elokechem, your reality, your nature, what you recognize to be the world is Havaya, not Elokim. Your energy, your life force, this is Havaya. Even someone who's at this standing, who's at this level, he has to be careful. His will is not going to be satisfied from this service. As in, make sure you don't have any self-satisfaction. Because what happens? Self-satisfaction, become a full vessel. Because then he's going to stand in his place. He's going to stagnate. He's not going to keep going in his service. And we're not just standing on a flat surface. It's like you're standing on an incline. So you stay like that. Now you're not going to go up, but you're at risk of going down. He's standing in one place, he's not going forward. Key, because because on top of this feeling of satisfaction, that his ratzon, that his will is going to be satisfied, what can he cause? He could cause that the av and yir that he already has, that he already gave birth to, will not endure. That's the thing with the Mishakelia. There are children, but we have to make sure the children endure. This is what the matter. This is what a Mishakelia is. So the love and fear are there. The divine service is perfect. But how do you make sure that it's enduring divine service? That's where it says, Lo Mishakelia, that a person should not be this Mishakelia. That even at the time, the hour when he is serving with love and fear, what's going to happen? His service is going to be constrained, measured, and limited. It's going to be according to what's required for his satisfaction, for satisfying his will. As in self-satisfaction, if a person's like, okay, I reached the level and I'm good, he's not going to progress, and not just that, whatever he's going to do is going to be, okay, this is my 100%, I've reached 100%. Which actually, if you remember, let's go back to chapter 15 of Tanya, which is what is the difference between Eved Elokim, someone who serves God and someone who does not serve? Someone who serves is someone who's always going for the 101%, for the 110%. 100% is not enough. So someone who's active service, someone who is serving is someone who's always going to the next stage, who keeps going. And that's the whole idea of what this Maamar is. We can't get distracted. We can't say, oh, we're good enough. We can't be satisfied. Because you're satisfied, there's no forward progress, and there's even a risk of going back. Instead, you got to be fully focused forward. Stay on the goal. We don't have time for all the other stuff. Debating, wondering, where are we, whatever. You got to move forward. On this it is said that there should not be a Mishakelia or an akar ba'atzacha in your land. Ba'atzacha daika specifically in your land. Where is that from? Because the word of eretz, of land, is from the language of ratzon, which is want. We saw originally that it's rutz, that it's running, and then we said it's also the language of want. Hainu, this is that he should not feel any sort of satisfaction. He should not be self-satisfied at all. Should not have any sort of satisfaction from his service. That he should not be. Really, remember the servant, the self is not there. So his entire self, all of his desires, his stuff have to be set aside. What happens? He becomes a full vessel that can't take in anymore. I am content. Content means I don't need anything else. I don't need to take in anything else. So if a person reaches that in their divine service, then they stop. They stagnate. They're not moving forward. There's so much more that has to be done. And not just that, when a person becomes a vessel that can't take anymore, the akara, who doesn't have the womb, you don't have an ability to receive. What happens? The person can then revert back to becoming that first kind of akara that we spoke about, which is someone who can't take in. So why someone akara? Because they can't take in. So here it's saying, it's not just once you get out of that akara stage, hey, oh, I'm safe. You have to also prevent getting into the Mishakelia stage, which is someone who becomes satisfied, that becomes this full vessel and says, oh, I did enough, and you have done it all correctly. But no. We have no self-satisfaction from this. Also because there shouldn't be self at all. Remember, servant to the master, there shouldn't be there at all. But in general, we can't allow to say, okay, I've done enough. What about all the days and years and months and hours and everything before you? Now we'll look at, this is part of the end of that first verse where it says, I will fill the number of your days. So originally we were saying that, oh, you're not just going to have good health, I'll remove illness, you're going to have good health, but also I'll fill the numbers of your day, you're going to have longevity. Now that we're looking at the spiritual counterpart, what does it mean here? Does it literally mean long life? This is from Tehillim, Galmu Ra'u Enecha, Val Sifracha Kulim Yakasevu, Yamim Yutzaru, V'lo Achad Behem. Yamim Yutzaru, we actually saw those words before at the first Maamar that we did, the Shema Maamar. What is it? Your eyes saw my own body, and on your book they were all written. Days have been formed, and one of them is his. Days has been formed. Looking at that specifically, what does it mean that days have been formed? To prevent self-satisfaction, a person contemplates that everyone has a fixed number of days. And every day, every hour, every moment should be directed toward fulfilling his mission in this world. So how do you keep yourself from the Mishakelia stage? So akara, you're too full, you have to empty out, or sow the light of torments, etc. But how do you prevent yourself from saying, nah, I'm good, I've reached the stage? You have to remind yourself, God gave you a certain amount of days, and every single day and moment that you're alive is a day that you still got something that has to get done. You can't say, no, it's enough. And not just that. Having all the days means that there's still stuff left for you to do. Not just you have a certain amount. Every single day has to be maximized. God doesn't just make up numbers for you. God gave you a very set amount of time. Limited time, but it's a very set amount of time. Not only refining the physical substance of this world, but time itself is an entity created with purpose, which must be elevated. So it's not just that, oh, you have a certain amount of time to get your work done, but time itself has to be elevated. That goes back to the idea that the first mitzvah that we were given in Egypt as a people, we were given the mitzvah of blessing the new moon, because time itself has to be sanctified. Let's not be negligent with our time. Not only were days formed for him, but he must form the days accordingly. So it works both. You have a certain amount of time, now you have to form them back. You have to turn them into holy days, holy time. Man should be so preoccupied and busy with this task, so involved in fulfilling his mission, that he has no time for self-satisfaction or worry over his own spiritual level. That's going to prevent somebody from self-satisfaction. Next time, we're going to get into what does it mean to being so preoccupied, etc. But when somebody remembers I only have a certain amount of time on this earth, I'm not going to waste time. I'm not going to miss a chance to do a mitzvah. I'm not just going to let a day pass that I didn't say Shema, I didn't say a bracha, I didn't give tzedakah. You can't do that because you have an X amount of time and I got to get something done every single day, minute, hour, etc. So we should be so focused on the end game, so focused on we must get stuff done that we don't even have time for everything else. You're going to be so busy. When you're so busy, you don't have time for all the other shtusim. You don't have time for like, what is my mental state right now? What is my emotional state right now? We don't got time for that. We got stuff that has to get done. That's spiritual counterpart of that. It's not just to make sure you have love and fear of God and you have to sustain it, etc. But now that you've got all that, how do you prevent yourself from sleeping? By remembering that we only have a certain amount of time and we got to utilize that time to do what we got to do. Action oriented is what it's all about.